Hey, everybody, and thank you so much for being here on Deborah Kobylt Live. I have the coolest guest in studio with me right now, Jenna Bush. Jenna, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You have done so many things, I don't even quite know how to introduce you. I'm going to take a crack. Okay, here we go. Jenna Bush is a TV and web series host. She's a writer. She's an author. She's here to talk about some of the books that I have in front of me. I'll lift them up in a minute. You're a moderator. In fact, you just most recently moderated some panels at Comic-Con, and I know that you even did a little modeling show at Comic-Con.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, too. And something that I think is really incredible, you hosted 2 seasons of a web series with Mr. Stan Lee, Cocktails with Stan. That is an honor. That's just about this much of her bio. You have done so much. In fact, she's so important. She's got that little blue dot next to her name over on Instagram.
I feel fancy.
Yeah, she's fancy. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were talking about your book,
Yes.
Wonder Woman Psychology. You wrote an excerpt in here.
Yes. I've contributed to the whole series.
Yes, which is pretty amazing. You also say that you are a geek expert.
I am very, very nerdy.
You don't look like a nerd, but what you're saying is, you're very much deep into the comic book world, Star Wars, Star Trek, so many of them. And we're going to have to get into that because that's a whole world that I know about and read about and people in my family are interested in, but I struggle keeping up. So,
There is a lot of stuff in the geek world. It is huge.
I think you've got to be super smart to figure out what's going on in geek world because there's a lot going on and the characters are deep and intertwined, and just from doing my research on you, that's what I realized. But the one thing I want to start with are women in comics.
Yes.
Okay, because before Wonder Woman there was really no one, and then after Wonder Woman there was really no one, right?
Well, there were some, but they were basically all put into spandex and drawn for the straight male gaze. I mean, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, there are actually quite a few female superheroes, and it's kind of wonderful. DC Comics actually did something called DC Superhero Girls, and their goal was to make sure that young girls could name a number of female superheroes.
But that's now. Was that then?
No.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Look, we've come a long way, baby.
We have indeed.
We've come a long way. So I know that you were even involved with this little gal here, Rey from Star Wars, right?
Yes. I started a campaign called Where's Rey on Twitter and all over the internet because when Star Wars The Last Jedi came out, I'm sorry, not The Last Jedi. The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi was the last
There's
one.
so many. How do you keep
I know.
track?
Well, the 9th one will be out this December. But they weren't bringing out toys that were directed toward girls. And it was really frustrating considering she's the lead in the movie. And so along with Carrie Goldman, who has written books on bullying and started an anti-bullying foundation, I talked about the fact that there are female geeks in the world, and there are as many as there are male geeks, and it's really important that we're represented. And they said, oh, well, girls don't buy toys. Yes, we do. You can have my money. Do you want my money? Give me the money.
So what did you do? Who did you go to, and how did you get her made and on the shelves? This is pretty incredible.
Well, that one, I had nothing to do with that one in particular. But I think what happened was when I started talking about it on my website, Legion of Leia, which is at vitalthrills.com, people really started to take notice, and they wanted toys too. And because it isn't just me. I mean, there are so many women who are into this stuff, and it's really important that we're represented.
Right, you don't just want to be buying Harrison Ford, actually.
No,
right?
I mean, he's delightful, but
he's delightful to have up on your shelf.
Sure.
But you need Rey too.
You do. And I think having people started to see this, and I think toy companies started to take notice, and when the toys started coming out, they sold. And in the end, that's what it's about. It's about money, and we're willing to give it to you.
But you were responsible for getting her out there as a toy.
I tried my best.
'Cause to me, that's a really big deal.
Well, I went into a Target, and I saw a little boy pick up a Rey doll and hug her. And I maybe cried a little bit. Because it's important, and it's really important not just for girls to see themselves, but for little boys to look up to women, to female characters too, and characters of all genders. And so seeing this little boy hug this Rey doll and say, I want to be Rey for Halloween, that matters to me because I wanted to be Han Solo. And Princess Leia, of course, always Princess Leia.
I think that's really incredible. I mean, to be able to push the envelope so that boys can like male and female characters and girls can relate to their male and female characters. I mean, because they're all equally strong characters if they're written that way and presented that way, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times what we've seen is a big group of male superheroes with one woman. And it's really frustrating because there are more women than men in the world. So it'd be, nice to see that on screen.
It's slowly happening.
It is.
And in fact, it's starting to now accelerate, the movement of having women just represent across the board. But I had an astrophysicist on my show not long ago, and she said that she was inspired by a TV show to become an astrophysicist. And now she goes around speaking to get more girls interested in sciences and and now with the 50th anniversary of NASA, we have more girls who are interested in science and the space program. All I can say is finally, and why not? I'm not quite sure why we were prevented, really.
I think in the geek world, at least, I know a lot of, when I was younger, I played video games. I was the only girl on my block who played video games back then. And
so you were the tomboy.
I was. I did not like dresses. But the boys then said things like, I would love it if more girls played video games. And then when we started we got backlash. There was something called Gamergate, which was essentially a backlash against women who play video games and who report on video games like I do.
Ew.
And I got threats every single day for months. I had to look into home security.
Are you kidding? Whoa. So you were bullied.
Oh, yeah.
For playing video games.
I mean, I do things online, so I'm sort of used to it. But for video games, that was a really big deal. And to have that happen in my 40s was the strangest thing because I've played them my entire life, since Atari 2600, which should tell you my age. But I was really surprised. And the first threat I got was after writing a story about the fact that there are now more female gamers than male gamers. And
where is that story? Because I think people need to read that.
I will find it. I can't even remember what website I wrote it for because I've written for everybody and their mother.
Just list. In fact, when I did a little pre-interview with you, I said, you're going to have to list all the stuff you've done because I'm not going to remember. I mean, I got it written down here. But
oh, yeah. So IGN, Newsarama, Huffington Post, Joe Blow, ComingSoon.net, VitalThrills.com, Movie Phone, Rotten Tomatoes. I write a lot. I don't sleep.
How did you start in this business? Now, I know that you were a geek as a kid.
Yes.
So how did this evolve into a career for you?
Well, I started as a musical theater actor.
Went to Syracuse.
Yes, I did. And I played Evita for about a year. And then I went into
in New York City.
In New York and in Austin, Texas.
Wow.
Which was a lot of fun. But I ended up transitioning into makeup. And then a friend of mine from high school named Chris Radke was running a site called UGO.com, which is no longer around. And he called me one day and said, I would love to have you do an interview with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson. You're the only person I trust on camera. Yes, it was Bucket List. And it was an incredible experience. And I just started writing about everything in the geek world.
How were they to interview?
They were so much fun. I asked them about, there's a type of coffee, I think it's called Kopi Luwak, but it is processed through a cat's digestive system before they process the berries. So I asked him, would you drink it? And Morgan Freeman said, would you drink it? And I explained that my sister once got me as a joke weasel vomit coffee, and I had that. And he said, you're a little crazy. So
they love crazy.
They do.
Because when you go to these interviews and junkets with these actors, oh my God, if they get the same question over and over, it's almost like they could read their answer. When something different comes along, it perks them up. So they must have loved that.
That was
I always
fun.
try and go in with something a little off because then they go, oh, she's on her game.
Oh, I had a crazy one. So for UGO, I had to go ask everybody who would win in a fight, a minotaur with a trident or a centaur with a crossbow. And that's a weird question for people. If you're geeky, you know the answer.
I was going to say, clearly with my face, I'm like, what?
I have no idea.
But I know the geeks know what that means.
Yes. And I can tell you, I think it's a centaur with a crossbow because ranged weapons, it's easier. You don't have to get up close and fight, especially with an opponent that's stronger than you.
I would have guessed that.
Yes, of course.
I would have guessed that, right,
course.
Tony? Let's talk about this incredible woman-thology that you brought in. Wow.
So this is a comic book anthology that was done completely by women. We did a Kickstarter. We were supposed to raise $25,000. We raised $109,000. A bunch of geek celebrities like Neil Gaiman and Jim Lee donated gifts for awards if you donate. And it was incredible. I think the comic book
These
industry...
are comics all done by women. When was this done?
All done. This was, I believe, was it 2008? It was quite a number of years ago, but
I don't know if you
I
can see
have
it.
2 stories in there, and it was an incredible experience. It was just...
Wow.
I think the
I
comic
didn't
book,
even know this was... This is something I'd like to get.
it was
Womanthology.
incredible. And actually, this was the book... We talked in the pre-interview about this, but when I used to do the show with Stan Lee, the day I went in, he said to me, I know everything about you. I know you did a comic book. Please sign it and bring it in for me, which I will never get over for the rest of my life. But this was the book. So...
Oh, I'm sure.
And
that took my breath away just hearing that.
I'll never
Wow.
be over it, ever.
How did you start doing that show with him? Come on. That's a big deal.
Well,
Stan Lee, okay, just explain for people who might not know who Stan Lee is.
Oh, Stan Lee created Spider-Man, and that right there is pretty much all you need to know. But he was a huge comic book writer, and he just created so many beloved characters. And I had done a bunch of shows. I'd done Movie Phone Minute and a bunch of hosting gigs. And so some people came to me and they said, we'd love to do a project with you. And I always say yes, which explains my very long resume. And they said, it's with Stan Lee. And after I finished choking on my water, I said, yes, I will happily do that. And he was the coolest man. I taught him what a selfie was.
Wow. So was he taking a little selfie? Oh, I should have had you send me something. I mean, so, do we have anything with her with Stan Lee?
Oh,
if not, we could find it on.
It's on my Facebook page. It's my main picture, so I can definitely show you one.
Oh yes, I saw that today. Okay.
Yeah, so the selfie. I was doing a panel with him, and I was backstage at LA Comic-Con, and I had just taken a picture of a little boy dressed as Stan Lee.
Oh
and
wow!
I said,
there you guys are. Yeah.
And I was like, Stan, let's take a selfie. And I held it up, and he was asking me what a selfie was, and the picture was still on there. I was about to turn the camera on, and he said, "That's not me. That's a little boy dressed as me. What are you doing?" So I had to explain selfies to him.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that must have been truly, other than Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, Stan Lee clearly was the career highlight. So Cocktails with Stan.
Yes.
What kinds of stuff did you talk about? Clearly the comic book world.
Oh, yeah. Well, Stan and I would actually interview people together. So we had Nathan Fillion on, and we had Donald Faison and Mark Silvestri. And so we had Elvira on. We actually had a very bizarre
I gotta
conversation
get Elvira on
with
here.
her.
She'd come on.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, let's talk to her.
She's so cool. But she was talking about when she dated Elvis. And then we had a whole discussion. You can still find this online. A whole discussion about whether or not men could be bad kissers because Stan was unaware of how this could be a thing. And in the middle of that
clearly Stan had something going on.
Well, Stan was married for a long time,
Yeah.
so he clearly was good at it. I'm just assuming. But so he said he didn't think that was possible. And in the middle of the conversation, my brain suddenly went, I'm having a discussion about kissing with Stan Lee and Elvira. My life is weird.
What was Elvira saying about kissing? Was she talking about like Elvis not being a good kisser?
No. I actually don't remember exactly what led us into the conversation, but we tried to explain to Stan that yes, men can be bad kissers.
I know sometimes, especially with people like that, with such megastars, conversations just evolve and go where they're going to go.
So weird.
Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
But that's what makes interviewing so interesting. You do have to roll with it. People like that, you kind of almost have to it's like open mic, wherever it goes.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I feel, interviewing you, because you've had such an incredibly esteemed career. You're so interesting. I mean, the whole geek world thing. What is geek world? What is geek life? You grow up a certain way, just liking what?
Well, I got into it with the Wonder Woman TV show that was on in the 70s.
With Linda Carter.
Linda Carter, yeah. And
she scared me. I'm very serious.
Really?
Scared the hell out of me.
She's Wonder Woman.
Gigantic. Like bigger than life. Obviously, they cast her for that reason. And for that reason, it was scary to me. Now I look at her and she's badass. I look up to her, but as a little kid, it was a little disarming to me. Maybe because there was nobody else.
There was
she
nobody
was
else. It was Wonder Woman and Princess Leia, and that was it was Star Wars that really got me. Princess Leia was very different than the women I saw on TV outside of Wonder Woman because she wasn't draped over a hero. She wasn't there as set dressing. she was the star.
Princess Leia.
Princess Leia. And they came to rescue her, and she took over her own rescue. I love that, you know?
Oh, you must have really been pretty sad the day that she passed.
Oh, yeah. And it was the strangest thing. I had to get up and speak on TV about it, and I had to write a story for the Washington Post. And it didn't really hit me until the end of the day. I also know somebody who was on the plane with her at the
We're talking about Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, and it didn't really hit me
did.
until I watched my own segment on the news at night. And then it just hit me that this woman who was my idol growing up was gone, and it was really realize your age.
It was such a sad moment because she passed, her mom passed.
Yeah.
The poor daughter is left with a shock, a double shock. So someone was on the plane with her?
Yeah, and it's so sad because she was just such a wonderful person, not just as Princess Leia, but with the work she did for mental health and acceptance. And she was a riot.
I agree with you. She was out there front and center. She wasn't ashamed. I used to get very angry when people would mock her.
Yeah.
Because there's no shame in struggle.
None.
There's no shame at all. And if more of us admit to struggle, whatever it is, whether you're struggling mentally with your weight, whatever, it all actually comes down to mental.
It does.
We'd all feel a little better about it because then you share how you got through it, you know?
Yeah, in fact, I know you'd mentioned the fashion show that I did at Comic-Con, and part of it
anything
was...
she doesn't do?
No. No, I do all the things.
I've done fashion shows.
Yeah, this is
Calvin
my first
Klein.
one.
Yeah,
Ooh.
big deal. Uh-huh.
Oh,
We'll
no,
get into
that's
that later.
That's huge. But
Yeah, it is.
this was for her universe, so I got to wear a Harry Potter costume, which is very geeky.
Wait, what did you were Harry Potter?
No, I was Fleur de la Cour. So it's a
Oh.
blue dress with a capelet, and they sell it at Her Universe, which is a company that was started by Ashley Eckstein, and it's to have geek clothing for women, and they're now with Hot Topic. But she has a shirt
this
that
is
came
great.
out. Oh, I love this
I
stuff.
look at her face. You're
I'm
so you're
excited.
exuberant. This is so your world. This
It
is great.
It is. And this shirt that I wore, one of the things I wore in the show says, "I break stigmas." And it's talking about mental health, and it was really wonderful. It was
We
a great
need to
experience.
talk more about mental health.
I think
I
so,
break
too.
stigmas.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I break stigmas.
It was really fun. And I had to learn to walk like a model, which I've never done before. So
What did they teach you?
They told me the hands swing behind the back, and they taught me the poses. And someone came up to me and said, "Oh, you've walked before?" And I said, "No, I'm just a giant ham."
Yeah, I mean, so in addition to being a geek, you're a supermodel now.
Or just a giant ham.
Yeah. Wow. So Black Panther.
Yes.
You did. What did you do in Black Panther? This
I
is
wrote-
another one of the books in the
The
in the
Psych Geek
series.
series. Yeah, they're all edited by Dr. Travis Langley. I have 2 chapters in there. One I did with Travis Adams and one I did with Dr. Janina Scarlett. One is on women in combat because we have warriors in Black Panther who are all female. And then the other one was on parasocial relationships, which I know a lot of people don't know this, but you'll understand when I tell you. So parasocial relationships is the relationship that you have as a real person to characters that you love. So a relationship with, say, Dumbledore from Harry Potter, and the sadness you feel when a character dies or something bad happens to them. You know, how you react with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, how that means something to you, and the benefits from parasocial relationships.
What are some of the benefits? Because frankly, I'm thinking about it and I'm going, this is not so bad. They're not going to talk back to me and give me a hard time. I could just sort of steer the conversation where it needs to go. Okay, tell me
Exactly.
about it. I like this.
It's really wonderful. So when you have a character that you love, particularly in something like a TV show, when you're seeing this ongoing thing, or in a comic book series, you see a character who may be going through the same things that you are. You can watch them work it out so you have a better idea of what to do and what not to do. They don't judge you, as you said, because no one's talking back to you. And sometimes with our friends, we try to play things down, like, "Oh, I'm fine, I don't want to complain, no big deal."
Or, you know what's even worse? When you complain and they go, "Oh." And then I think, "Uh-oh."
Like, "Oh, I didn't want to tell you that." And
Oh, but it really isn't that bad.
No,
Because
it's
then
fine,
you
it's
get
fine.
embarrassed and you just backtrack. It's like, it's not so bad.
Exactly. And in the geek world, when you have a parasocial relationship, often what you're dealing with is somebody who's going through, say, a war, or they're going through a battle. And what you're going through is not necessarily a battle, but it feels like it. So
Wow.
watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer fight demons and go through death and come back from it, it's really traumatic, and it feels like what you've been through.
You know, all of these characters, I forgot about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Love Buffy.
One by one have been making us feel like we can do that. I remember watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and two things would come to mind. She's amazing. She's badass, and I want to do that. And then the other side was, but it never really could be because she's a girl. But now, cut to 10, 20 years later, and it's like, oh yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
And then some. Same with women in the military,
Yep.
where it used to be like, never, you know. And now it's like, if we want to, we can.
Absolutely.
And I really believe the world of comics has changed all that.
It absolutely has. You're seeing a lot more women in comics. You're seeing a lot more characters of color, and you're seeing movie studios and TV studios start to say, oh, hey, there is a market for this. Because, you know, in the end, it's all about money. And when Wonder Woman came out, and I got to go to the premiere, which was an incredible experience, but when that came out, all of a sudden studios were like, oh, girls like this. Yes.
What about
yes, we do.
Supergirl?
So I love Supergirl.
I love Supergirl too.
Wonderful. It's such a wonderful show. Even something like Veronica Mars, which is not necessarily geek. It's sort of the spiritual successor to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there are new episodes out now. There are tons of geek references, characters from Buffy that were in the show. So I think you're seeing a lot more of women in powerful roles.
You know what's interesting? In the excerpt that you wrote in Wonder Woman, you talk about these characters having, though, compassion.
Yes.
So explain that to me.
Okay, so compassion is something that's really beginning to be recognized in the world of psychology. And I should say these books are pop culture experts and psychologists that get together to break these things down. So compassion is mindfulness, living in the present moment, and being kind to others. And that's something that you see with Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman isn't just about beating up the bad guys. She's also talking to them about what's going on. You see her in one of the animated series looking at a little girl who's being left out of a play sword fight. And so she teaches her to fight and lets her go back in. Or a situation where she's with Green Lantern, who wants to destroy a race of aliens that hurt his family. And she protects the aliens, but she also offers her hand to him. And compassion actually, if you practice it continually and mindfulness, it does tend to reduce depression and make you feel better overall. Just being able to understand what other people are going through, or to stop for a moment and think about it.
But it's interesting because do you think many of the male characters practice compassion? Like I could think one who does, Superman.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Superman.
I love Superman.
I love Superman
Oh,
too.
I love him. I loved all the Supermen. I mean, Christopher Reeve was in my time. He was my favorite. Once again, when he passed, I was devastated. Can I tell you a quick story about him?
Of course. Oh, I love him.
I mean, I've interviewed lots of people, right? But this is before interviewing anyone. I was pretty young, and he was walking, and I'm not usually starstruck, but he was walking down Broadway. He's a big guy, you know? And I never do this, but I followed him. I just kept following him in New York City, and and I just don't do that. I had such a crush on this man. He was amazing.
He was so wonderful, and Superman is another wonderful example.
Yeah.
And you do see it. And I think with comics, you really got a chance to go into the psyche of different characters, which is something you don't always see, say, in the movie, like because it's a short, it's 2.5 hours. But when you go into comics, you spend a long time with these characters. You also have authors doing different takes on them and their backstories.
Well, because you have more time. It's like anything. A movie is 2.5 hours or shorter, and you've got a book and a comic series that you can keep, you can keep writing about the character and developing the character. You're right about that.
Yeah. Well, it's something we were talking about at one of the panels I was on at Comic-Con called Holly Weird Science with Kevin Grazier, and we were talking about the mad scientist sort of character and how it's used often as shorthand. So you see a lab coat, you say, okay, now I'm going to get the explanation about the science that's going on.
Right, you're right about that.
But in movies, you never really have time to break them down and make them real characters, where in TV shows, something like, say, Eureka, which was on the Sci-Fi Channel, you do get to break that down, and you do get to spend time with them, and then they're not just these nameless, smart people who do nothing but science. What they are real people who have hobbies and loves and things they don't like outside of their work, and I really appreciate that.
Tell me a little bit about the evolution of comics, like some of the first comics that were out there. And wasn't there a time, I think, I could be wrong because this is not my thing, where comics were starting to, they weren't as popular.
Yes, absolutely.
And now it seems, especially with Comic-Con and all that, there's this massive resurgence. And now with women as superheroes, forget about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
The evolution, the up and down a little bit.
It's so, well, it started, it was just for kids. It was silly. And then the Comics Code Authority came out and said, oh, these are bad for children. And so they sort of went away. Then they came back. There was this big resurgence, and then it disappeared again. And if you look at Wonder Woman, you can sort of see her as an example of this. When she came out in the early 40s, she was very powerful. There was a situation where Steve Trevor asked her, when are we getting married, doll? And she said, when women are equal to men. That's not an exact quote, but that's what it was. But then in the 50s, after World War II, you saw her in love stories. And all she was talking about was, oh, Steve Trevor, I hope that we can be together someday. And it was sort of indicative of the place of women. Then you saw her later, she lost all her powers. She became a martial artist, and she worked in a clothing store.
Why?
They have, anybody who takes over a comic book tends to take it in a different direction.
Where they want to take it.
Right. And then Ms.
She was
Magazine.
working at a clothing store. Okay, whatever.
I know. And Ms. Magazine came out, I believe it was 1972, 72 or 73, but I think 72. They put her on the cover and said Wonder Woman for president. And they were originally going to do a story about bombing an abortion clinic, and they took that away and decided to put her back in her costume, put her back with her powers, and she became powerful again. You saw, I believe it was the late 90s or early 2000s, where she had pants. They changed her whole costume, and then she went back. And so there's been a huge resurgence in the comic book world, particularly starting with Iron Man.
You know, that's so important because I grew up, I played with Barbie and Ken, and I was always kind of getting them together.
Well,
but when they weren't, when they weren't getting together, I always had.
You just put them back and forth together.
I really did.
Yep.
And I was young.
We all did.
But when she wasn't doing that, I had her in pants. I had her going to work, not as a stewardess, and stewardess, that's a great profession. But I mean, like going and doing stuff. I had her in construction. And I remember I had her running. I had her doing stuff like that. My mom would go, well, maybe she could be a secretary. I said, what is she going to do as a secretary? Like, I want her to be the boss. And I guess I was an early sort of geek and heroine in my time, right?
I appreciate that.
But it was very much downplayed a little bit, like I was a skater and a competitive one, and I competed a lot of places. But even then it was like, I think it's a hobby. It's like, it is not a hobby, and I had to push. And I'm so pleased that we are in a time now. I mean, I am just so enamored with the soccer team, the women's soccer team, because they've also opened up the world of sports for women. What you do has opened up the world of geek worlds. I don't even like to call it geek world because to me geeks are something else. You know what I mean?
Geek. We love that term now. We use that.
You do?
All the time.
Okay,
we
cool.
We do. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love it, and it really has changed. Now when I was in Comic-Con the first year, I think it was 11, 12 years ago. No line for the ladies' room. Now the line's all the way out the door because women are there, and I think I saw a 50-50 split this year. It was pretty amazing. It was wonderful.
Do you think men are intimidated or they're just going with it? I think they need to go with it.
I think they need to go with it, too. I think some of them are intimidated, though. I think sometimes when you're in a group and you feel sort of put upon, you have your thing. And for many years, a lot of guys considered the geek world their thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And they feel like someone's encroaching on it. I was told when one of the Star Wars movies, Rogue One, came out, I posted the trailer on one of my websites, and I immediately got somebody complaining about, another female lead. I was like, who would ever say that about a man? Another male lead? No one would ever say that.
It's funny, I was having dinner with friends this weekend, and one of the men said, I'm so tired of the Me Too movement, and I feel like I'm being bashed all the time. And I looked at him and I said, how about you just take one for the team? We've been bashed and pushed aside for
all of history?
All of history since Eve was around, you know what I mean? And before her. But it's okay, just how about being part of the solution?
Yeah.
Move it forward with us, be excited when a woman like Stan Lee was to have you. And the fact that he invited you to be on his program. That's a forward-thinking man.
He was wonderful.
That's a forward-thinking man, and he knew what he was doing.
He did, and all he talked about, I have to say, we'd have breaks in between shows because we'd shoot about 3 a day, and he would talk about how wonderful his wife was.
See, there's a man who loves women and understands the equality.
Yeah.
We each have our parts and something to bring to the relationship. but it's equal.
Yeah.
In different ways. And I really hope that through what you do, that comes through more and more. Wow. What do you love doing the most? I mean, like I said, you moderate, you write, you host. You're here.
I love doing this, but I also love doing panels. I think they're a blast, and I love writing books. I actually have 2 that are on the way, and
talk
I'm
about that.
really excited about them.
You said only one we could really talk about.
Yes.
We can only touch upon the other.
Yes. Okay. So I have a quirky self-help book coming out called Skeptical Magic. I don't know when yet, but it's done, and it
Quirky
should be
self-help book called Skeptical Magic.
Skeptical Magic. I have found out through the years of searching to try to find what worked for me to make me a better person, going through different classes and studying Wicca and Buddhism, and I grew up Catholic and all of that stuff. What I found out is you take stuff from everywhere. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what you believe in. You just take the pieces that make you a better person. And that's really important to me. And I found little tricks through the years, particularly when I've gone through things like crazy surgeries or online bullying or things like that. Things that worked for me and didn't turn me bitter.
I was going to say, because it can turn you angry.
Oh, yes, it can.
And it didn't turn you angry. At least, even if it did, you got through it.
I did. And so hopefully people will enjoy the weird stories of things that happened to me. Like, for instance, I found this table that I wanted to use for spells because I thought it was very cool. And it was at an antique store. And it was a very short table, so I thought, oh, this must have been used. I was in my early 20s, but I was like, this must have been used for something very witchy. Well, what I found out it was actually a table that held a chamber pot. So people were using it to relieve themselves in. And yeah, so I started to look at things with a lot more humor after that. You don't take yourself very seriously when you do this for a living after a while.
Do you mainly hang with geeks who love this kind of stuff? Because I think if this is your interest, you're living it, you're breathing it. It really is interesting. You've taught me a lot in the few times that I've been talking to you. Really.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do. I mean, I hang out largely with geeks, but I have a lot of friends who aren't into this at all. Because I have interests other than that. Like, I love history. I love learning about history.
That's a little tip
It's a
about
tease
what
of-
a little tease about her second book.
Yeah, my
and
novel.
It is rich.
I'm so
That's all
excited.
I can say. It's rich. I got off the phone talking to my friends about it, you know, and
wow.
about the woman, the character in the book. So you just got to wait.
That is a good sign. That makes me happy.
Yep, it
but
did.
yeah, I mean, I love that. I love talking about politics with, well, most of the time, with friends about, you know,
That's
what's
complicated.
going on. It is.
Because the man everybody hates, whom I did not vote for, I always have to say that,
Yep,
is
me
not
neither.
quite as horrible as everyone is making him out to be. He's trying a little bit to change stuff that wasn't working. He just is not that effective because his personality is so difficult that it's hard to listen to anything he says. But I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I don't know if he's going to win again or not. He's not somebody I would vote for.
I lose sleep a lot over this, but you know.
I'm telling you, I wish people would just stop and see where the cards lay. Do you know what I mean? Where they fall. And then just to see where it falls. Because I actually think the left side is making it worse for themselves. Because they're beating it down so much. That's my opinion on it. I don't know. And I think if they don't come up with candidates that people want to get behind, they're going to lose again.
Yeah, I am, well, my politics are very clear. I definitely did not vote for him.
Yeah, no, I didn't either, but I
Yeah.
think the left is making it worse. I really, really do.
Yeah, I am definitely not a fan of his.
Who would you vote for? Not that I mean, I'm just
I
curious.
don't know
If you were to
yet.
vote today,
I'm a pretty hardcore Democrat, so I don't know. I'm still deciding on that, but it will definitely be Democrat because I've had enough of this. But it's a difficult thing to talk to people about. It really is, because people, I think, are so invested in a way, not that people haven't always been invested in politics, but I think they are in a way that they never have been before. And it's funny,
for obvious
because-
reason. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's tough to feel like that he understands you. You know, that he
Yeah.
understands the common person in America. So
Yeah.
I understand that.
And I'm used to arguing, because anybody involved in the geek world knows that people get very, very angry.
That's right.
Oh, so angry.
They do. They argue about
really
their
do.
characters, and they
Oh, yeah.
blow up friendships and relationships.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember when I was first starting out in the geek world, I had discussions with friends about, say, Batman. And I would say, "Oh, this new cool thing about Batman. Do you know that too? No, let me share it with you." Whereas some geeks say, "You don't know that cool thing about Batman? You know nothing." And particularly as a woman, what I got a lot was quizzes on what I knew. And as you said, the geek world is huge, and there is no way you can know everything. I do my best, but there is no way you can know everything.
So you just came back from Comic-Con.
Yes.
You're working on your books. What else are you doing other than being here?
Ooh, well, I write for Legion of Leia, which is my website on vitalthrills.com. So I work for them.
That's pretty massive.
It's
I know.
wonderful. I'm doing some writing for Sci-Fi Fangirls, and which is very female-centric, part of Sci-Fi Wire, and that's been really wonderful. And I do some web series here and there, and more hosting hopefully will come up because
You're
I really
fantastic.
enjoy it.
I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, she should write her own comic and star in it.
Oh, I've been in a couple of comics actually.
Which ones?
There's
but a regular series.
there's
I mean,
a few.
it needs
Well,
to be Jenna.
I
What do you think? Jenna.
I could be a superhero.
Yeah.
But then I would have to reveal my secret identity. And no, I've actually written a bunch of comics. So I did them for Womanthology, but I also wrote one with Jeffrey Henderson, who's a storyboard artist, and an actor and director. And we did one that was based around Evita, about Eva Perón, for the Pretender series. And yeah, I've written a few.
How exciting.
It's really fun.
This is pretty smart, deep stuff because it's not just a comic. I mean, if you're writing about Evita, Eva Perón, I mean, there's so many layers. And when you're reading these comics, you have to be able to really kind of peel back some layers because there's an awful lot to it.
So much.
So for people just getting into the comic book world or into geek world, how do you think they should start?
I would say start with a character that you're comfortable with. Somebody like Wonder Woman if you want, or Supergirl. There's a really great series out called Saga. That's
What's that
wonderful. There is no way to explain that. Just look for it.
Saga?
Yeah, they'll know what it is when you walk into the store. And don't be intimidated. There are certainly some stores that I've been to myself where you walk in as a woman and they say, "Oh, do you just think Chris Hemsworth's cute?" I actually had this happen in a store. A woman walked in. I was doing a podcast in the store, and a woman walked in and said, I'd like to start with Thor comics because I've seen the movies. And he said, "Oh, you just think he's cute." And I said, everyone has to start somewhere. Everyone's read their first comic. Even the people that know everything had their first comic book. And mine was X-Men. Mine was because there's a character, Storm, who can control the weather. And when I was a little girl, I saw her, and I lived in New York, and I said, all I want is a snow day. If I were Storm, I could have a snow day.
That is the coolest thing. Do you remember, oh, come on, Storm, what was his name? He was a weatherman in New York
Oh,
City.
yes.
Yes. Storm what? Oh, my gosh. My husband would know this.
I can't
Storm.
remember the name, but I totally remember him on TV.
Good looking, I got to
Yes, yes. I totally remember him on TV.
How could we both not know
I know,
that?
I know.
Oh, it's killing
It's
me.
been a long time. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time.
Yeah.
And I was a really little kid. But he got me excited, pardon me, about weather.
Yeah.
And Alan Casper. Do you remember him if you lived in New York?
Yes.
He became a friend of ours, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because my husband is a geek, and he
Yeah.
loves stuff like weather. It's all he talks about is the weather. And so he draws up little weather charts. And
Oh my gosh.
I know. Oh, look, you'd probably get along great with him with that stuff. so.
Probably would. And I think geek is a term that's used as enthusiast. So
Yes,
you can
I
be a
agree with
sports
you.
geek, you know.
Other series, of course, in the world of geek, the big one now, Game of Thrones. Oh my God. I mean, we'd be remiss not to mention that.
Oh, I have thoughts.
Joker also is something.
Yes. Well, we have Game of Thrones Psychology came out a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the Joker Psychology coming out on October 1st.
Right. So please look for that.
That's
Joker.
on Amazon and in Barnes and Noble. It's all over the place, so you can find all of these easily.
That's so exciting.
Joker's fascinating, and Game of Thrones is fascinating, and I loved it because there were so many powerful women in there. Arya is my favorite. I have her sword on my wall.
Wow.
Yeah,
I got to come to your place because
It
you
is
must have
so
like
nerdy.
stuff all over the place. All these
So
great
much.
characters. Wow.
So
I'm
many
so
toys.
glad that you came in to sort of explain to us the world of geek, the world of comics. My first one was, it wasn't superhero stuff. The Archies
Oh yeah.
and Scooby-Doo.
Oh,
Okay.
Scooby-Doo.
I talk about compassion. I mean, that was my stuff. Okay, that's That's what I was into.
Hey, Archie's still going on as a comic,
I thought they
and
were
there's
like the
Riverdale.
coolest. Yeah, they were really cool, but I wasn't really into Riverdale. So that was like sort of the extent of it. But now I'm going to get a little more into it. I want to just read deeper into some of the characters.
It's
so
wonderful.
Thank you for the introduction.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to talk about it.
So people want to get in touch with you. How do they do that?
Okay, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Jenna Bush, and it's Busch, like the beer, not the president.
Yeah, and you're also going to get the wrong person if you don't spell it right.
Yes,
so.
I get messages for her father all the time.
Really? And what do they say? Positive, negative? What?
Usually it's negative. And
Yeah. Oh,
my
that's
father
really funny.
is on Twitter, but he was not the president.
There you go. So that's how you can get in touch. And I look forward to having you back. I
would love to.
I find you to be fascinating. I
Thank
really
you.
do. Smart woman. So thank you for spending your time with us. I
Oh,
appreciate
that was
it.
wonderful.
And everybody, just please pick up any of these. Can we still get Womanthology?
Womanthology, yes, you can get it on Amazon. It's
Okay, this I'm
Womanthology
gonna get, 'cause
Heroic.
it's a hardcover, and it's actually a beautiful book to even have on the coffee table so people can thumb through it. This is important.
A lot
So
of
I'm
good
gonna-
stories in there.
Yeah, Black Panther, Wonder Woman, and the entire series. So
Yes.
thank you for being here. And thank you for being here, Deborah Kobylt Live. Now, you can find us YouTube, Facebook Live, Instagrams, where we put all our promos. And then, of course, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and honestly, just any place that you get your podcasts. You can watch us, you can listen to us, just as long as you do one or the other. And like us, please, on all of those. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.